Around midday on December 22, 1944, General der Panzertruppen Heinrich von Lüttwitz stood inside a cold farmhouse command post west of Bastogne, Belgium, staring at a map that showed something he believed to be impossible. 3 days earlier, as commander of the German 47th Panzer Corps, he had successfully encircled the American 101st Airborne Division inside Bastogne during the Ardennes Offensive. The town was the linchpin of the region. 7 major roads converged there, and whoever controlled Bastogne controlled movement through the Ardennes. Von Lüttwitz commanded nearly 15,000 troops, 45 tanks, artillery, and a complete encirclement. Inside the town, the Americans had barely 6,000 exhausted men, low ammunition, limited medical supplies, no armor support, and no clear path for reinforcement. Winter weather had grounded Allied aircraft, making air resupply nearly impossible. Standard military doctrine said such a force should collapse within 48 to 72 hours. Von Lüttwitz had already sent a formal surrender demand to Bastogne's acting commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, and received the now famous one-word reply, "Nuts." Even with such defiance, von Lüttwitz believed the situation hopeless for the Americans. But now, the map on his table showed Third Army units, Patton's army, advancing from the south, moving at a speed no staff officer had predicted and no German commander believed physically possible. Just days earlier, Third Army had been more than 150 kilometers away near the German border, fully engaged in offensive combat around Saarbrücken. Military doctrine dictated that a field army engaged in major operations required 1 to 2 weeks to disengage, reorient 90 degrees, reposition logistics, and then mount a counteroffensive through winter terrain. Yet the map showed Patton's lead elements already making contact with German outposts south of Bastogne. It violated every principle of movement von Lüttwitz had studied in his entire professional life. He had been warned about Patton by German generals who had faced him previously. General Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein, commander of the elite Panzer Lehr Division and a close friend of von Lüttwitz from their service in North Africa and Russia, had told him that fighting Patton was unlike fighting any other Allied commander. In July 1944, during Operation Cobra, Bayerlein had constructed a textbook mobile defense south of St. Lo, expecting the Americans to advance methodically, consolidate terrain, and attack predictably. But Patton's Third Army did the opposite. Instead of consolidating, they bypassed strongpoints, drove deep into German lines, and advanced faster than German forces could reposition. In just 72 hours, German withdrawal routes were severed and the Panzer Lehr Division lost operational cohesion, not from firepower, but from movement. Bayerlein had said that facing Patton felt like facing an army that ignored the rules of war, the doctrinal limits both sides understood. Von Lüttwitz had also spoken with General der Panzertruppen Walter Kruger, who commanded the 58th Panzer Corps during the defense of the Moselle River. Kruger explained that river crossings normally required days of preparation, reconnaissance, and artillery support. Patton crossed the Moselle in 24 hours, in multiple locations, using improvised rafts, assault boats, and even swimming infantry. German doctrine predicted such piecemeal crossing attempts could be crushed, but Patton's simultaneous penetrations overwhelmed the reaction time of German reserves. The Moselle defensive line, expected to hold for weeks, collapsed in 5 days. Report after report from Lorraine, Alsace, and central France confirmed the same pattern. Patton's army consistently advanced twice as fast as German staff projections estimated. Von Lüttwitz studied these reports carefully. A skilled logistician, he calculated that an American armored division required roughly 300 tons of supplies per day and should therefore have been limited to an advance of 20 to 25 kilometers per day. Yet Patton's units were moving 40 to 50 kilometers daily, sometimes more, and continued attacking even when fuel shortages forced tanks to halt until trucks arrived. German commanders attributed this to recklessness, advancing without proper logistical buffers. But the results were undeniable. German defensive lines collapsed not because they failed tactically, but because they could not reposition fast enough to counter Third Army's tempo. Historical intelligence from Sicily told the same story. In 1943, Patton's 7th Army had broken every expectation, outrunning its own supply lines and outflanking German positions to reach Messina before Montgomery. Captured German reports described American units appearing in rear areas days earlier than predicted, operating with minimal supplies simply to maintain speed. German doctrine considered this suicidal. Patton considered it essential. Yet Patton's style had weaknesses. Von Lüttwitz studied the recent siege of Metz, where the German fortress network, 43 interconnected forts of reinforced concrete and steel, had slowed Third Army for 3 months. Patton's insistence on assaulting Fort Driant in September 1944 had resulted in significant American casualties and no gains. General Omar Bradley had scolded Patton, urging him to bypass Metz entirely. Patton refused, driven by pride and an instinctive desire for frontal pressure. The siege ultimately succeeded only after American forces encircled the city in November, starved the garrison, and forced surrender. German commanders viewed Metz as proof that static, fortified positions could contain Patton, if they had enough time, terrain, and preparation. But Metz also revealed that even when stalled, Patton kept his army flexible. While one corps besieged the city, another continued offensive operations toward the Saar, maintaining momentum instead of allowing himself to become trapped. Pattern recognition became clear. Montgomery fought like chess, methodical and predictable. Bradley fought carefully, securing flanks and supply lines. Both were dangerous but understandable. Patton fought like a storm, fast, improvisational, and psychologically destructive. German soldiers facing Montgomery or Bradley expected pauses between attacks, time to consolidate, and opportunities to counterattack. Facing Patton, German units reported disorganized withdrawals, breakdowns in communication, and collapsing morale. They simply could not react fast enough. German intelligence summarized it best in a report by Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt. Montgomery's operations could be anticipated days in advance. Bradley's could be predicted hours in advance. Patton's were often detected only after they had begun. Rundstedt warned that any offensive by Patton must be contained within 72 hours, or it would achieve irreversible penetration. German forces in late 1944 no longer had the manpower, mobility, or fuel reserves to meet that requirement. And now, on December 22, 1944, von Lüttwitz saw the nightmare unfolding on his map table. 4 days earlier, Patton had attended a conference with Eisenhower, where Ike asked how soon Third Army could pivot north to relieve Bastogne. Patton answered immediately, 48 hours. Every other commander in the room, including Bradley, thought it impossible. But Patton had already anticipated the order and directed his staff to draft contingency plans before the meeting. Within hours, entire divisions, tens of thousands of men, hundreds of tanks, miles of vehicles, were disengaging from active combat, turning 90 degrees, reorienting their supply routes, and marching through ice, snow, and narrow roads toward Bastogne. Standard planning required a week for such a maneuver. Patton executed it in 2 days. And now, as von Lüttwitz watched markers on the map move steadily northward, he realized the full scale of what Third Army had accomplished. The lead elements of the U.S. 4th Armored Division were already engaging his forward units south of Bastogne. The main force was only hours behind. Patton had broken every rule of operational movement, every doctrinal principle von Lüttwitz had relied on since his training days. Standing over the map, hearing reports of American armor approaching with impossible speed, von Lüttwitz understood the truth German commanders across Europe had reluctantly accepted. They could match Patton in firepower, in training, even in discipline, but they could not match his speed. And speed, in modern war, was its own form of destruction. Bastogne, which should have fallen in 3 days, now held. Patton, once again, had moved faster than an entire army group could react. And for von Lüttwitz, still staring at the map in that farmhouse, the impossible had become real.